Muslims or Kafir, brothers in Islam. Every Muslim believes, as you too must surely believe, that Muslims are different from Kafir, that God likes Muslims and dislikes Kafir, that Muslim will find God's forgiveness while Kafir will not, that Muslim will go to heaven and Kafir to Jahannam. I want you to consider why there should be so much differences between Muslims and Kafir. Kafir are as much offspring of Adam and Eve as you. They are human beings like yourself. They possess hands, feet, eyes, and ears. They breathe the same air as you, drink the same water, and inhabit the same land. The God who created you also created them. So why should they be ranked lower and you higher? Why should you go to heaven, and why should they be cast into hell? Consider carefully. Such a vital difference between man and man cannot simply be due to the fact that you have names like Abdullah and Abdul Rahman, and they have names like Qatar Singh, Smith, and Robertson, or that you are circumcised and they are not, or that you eat meat and they avoid it, or that they eat pork and you do not. Allah has created all human beings, and who is the sustainer of all cannot be so unjust as to decide on such petty ground which of his creatures to send to heaven and which to hell. Where then does the real difference lie between Muslims and Kafir? The answer is that it lies simply in the very nature of Islam and Kufr. The meaning of Islam is submission to God, while the meaning of Kufr is denial and disobedience of God. Muslim and Kafir are both human beings. Both are slaves of God, but one becomes exalted and meritorious by reason of recognizing his master, obeying his orders, and fearing the consequence of disobeying him, while the other disgraces himself by failing to recognize his master and carry out his order. This is why Allah is pleased with Muslims and displeased with unbelievers. That is why He promises true Muslims that they will be rewarded with heaven and warns unbelievers that they will be cast into hell. Knowledge and actions. The two things which separate Muslims and Kafir are, therefore, knowledge and action. That is, you must first know who your master is, what his orders are, how to follow his wishes, which deeds pleases him and which displease him. When these things are known, the second step is to make yourself true slaves of your master by giving up your own wishes in deference to what he desires. If your heart desires to do a certain act and your master's order is against it, you should carry out that order. If something seems good to you, but your master says that it is bad, you must accept it as bad. And if something else seems bad, but your master says it's good, then you must accept it as good. If you think a certain action will be harmful, and your master says that it must be done, then done it must indeed be, even though it may entail you in loss of life or property. Similarly, if you expect to benefit from a certain action, but your master forbids it, you must refrain from it, even though it might have brought all the worldly treasures. This is the knowledge and action by which Muslim becomes true servants of Allah, on whom He bestows His mercy and whom He rewards with honor and dignity. Conversely, Kafir, since they do not possess this knowledge, are Allah's disobedient slaves and are denied His blessing. Now, in all fairness, tell me, if you call yourself Muslims, but in fact are as ignorant and disobedient as a kafir, can you in reality be superior to the latter merely on the strength of bearing different names, wearing different clothes, and eating different foods? Can you, on this basis, be entitled to the blessing of God in this world and the hereafter? Islam is not a race or family in which membership is automatically passed on from father to son. A high caste priest's son will not command respect in the eyes of God if he does wrong deeds, just because he is born into a priestly home, nor will he look down on the son of a low caste family, disregarding his good deeds simply because of his birth. On this point, God has explicitly stated in his book, "Indeed, the noblest among you in the sight of God is the most God-fearing of you." Al-Hujurat, Ayat 13. That is, the more you know God and the more you obey his commandment, the more honorable you are in his sight. Ibrahim was born into the home of an idolater, but he came to know God and obeyed him. That is why God made him Imam, leaders of the whole world. The son of Nuh was born into a prophet's home, but he did not understand God and disobeyed him. Despite his high family connection, God so punished him that the punishment became an object lesson for the world. Understand, therefore, thoroughly that whatever differences there are in the sight of Allah between man and man depends entirely on the state of their knowledge and action. Both in this world and the hereafter, God's blessing is reserved for those who recognizes him, accept the right path shown by him, and carry out his commandment. Those who do not do this thing, whether their names are Abdullah or Abdurrahman or Qatar Singh, Smith or Robertson, are identical in the sight of in the sight of God. They are unworthy of his blessing. Why are Muslims humiliated today? Brothers, you call yourself Muslim and you believe that Allah showers his blessing on a Muslim. But open your eyes and see if those blessings are in fact descending on you. You cannot know what will happen to you in the hereafter until after your physical death. But you can most certainly look around you and see your condition here on earth. There are so many hundreds of millions of you in the world that if each of you were to throw a single pebble, they would make a mountain. But even though there are so many Muslim and Muslim governments, the world is in the hands of those who have rebelled against God. Your necks are in their grip, to be turned to whichever side they like. Your heads, which should not bow before anybody except Allah, are now bowed before human beings. Your honor, which no one dared to touch, is now being trampled upon. Your hands, which are once always held high, are now lowered and stretched out before your enemies. Ignorance, dependence, poverty, and indebtedness have subjected you to ignominy everywhere. Is this the blessing of Allah? If it is not, but rather a sign of anger, then how strange it is that it is Muslims on whom it is descending. You are Muslim, and yet you are wallowing in ignominy. You are Muslim, and yet are slaves. This situation is impossible, as it is for an object to be white and black. If Muslims are the loved one of God, how can they be treated disgracefully? Is your God so unjust that while you are, for your part, acknowledge his dues and obey his orders, he allows the disobedient to rule over you and punishes you for your obedience to him? If it is an article of faith with you that God is not just unjust and disobedient and obedient to a God can never result in disgrace, then you will have to concede that there is nothing wrong in your claim to be Muslim. Although you may be registered as Muslim on your birth certificate, Allah does not base His judgment on what is written on pieces of paper. God prepares His own list of obedient and disobedient servants, and it's in this list that you must search to find your true position. Allah sent you His book so that you may know Him and learn how to obey Him. Have you ever tried to discover what is written in it? Allah sent His Prophet to teach you how to become Muslim. Have you ever tried to find out what His Prophet has taught? Allah explicitly informed you which behavior debases man in this world and the hereafter. Do you avoid such behavior? What answer do you have to this question? If you admit that you have neither sought knowledge from God's book and His Prophet's life, nor followed the way shown by Him, then how can you claim to be Muslim and to merit His reward? The rewards you are getting now are in direct relation to how good Muslim you are, and your reward in the hereafter will be calculated on the same basis. We have already seen that the only difference between Muslims and Kafir is in the matter of knowledge and action. Men who call themselves Muslim, but whose knowledge and action are the same as those of Kafir, are generally of blatant hypocrisy, are guilty of blatant hypocrisy. Kafir do not read the Quran, and you do not, and do not, and the Kafir do not read the Quran and do not know what is written in it. If so-called Muslims are equally ignorant, why should they be called Muslim? Kafir do not know the teaching of the Prophet, blessing and peace be on him, and the straight path he has shown to reach God. If Muslims are equally ignorant of these, how can they be Muslim? Kafir follow their own desires instead of the command of Allah. If Muslims are similarly willful and undisciplined, setting their own ideas and opinion on a pedestal, indifferent to God and a slave so lust, what right have they to call themselves Muslim? Kafir do not distinguish between halal, which is permitted by Allah, and haram, which is prohibited by Allah, and make indiscriminate use of everything and anything, irrespective of whether it is halal or haram. Muslim behave the same as non-Muslim. What difference is there between them and Kafir? Put simply, if Muslims are as devoid of knowledge about Islam as Kafir, and if a Muslim does all these things which a Kafir does, why should he be considered superior to a Kafir? And why should his fate not be the same as that of a Kafir? This is a question on which we must all reflect very seriously. My dear brother, do not for a moment think that I am trying to brand Muslim as Kafir. That is not my purpose at all. I ask myself and implore each one of yours similarly to ask his own heart as to why we are being denied the blessing of God. Why are tribulation of all sorts descending upon us from all sides? Why are we disunited and disobedient upon each other's blood? Why are those whom we call Kafir, that is a disobedient slave of Allah, everywhere dominating us? And why are we, who claim to be His obedient servant, obedient slaves, living in servitude in so many parts of the world. The more I have reflected on the reason for this situation, the more I have become convinced that although the only difference now left between us and Kafir is that of mere names, for we in no way lag behind them in neglect of Allah, in being devoid of fear of Him, and in being disobedient to Him. I say almost because there is, of course, a difference between us. We know that the Quran is the book of God, while Kafir do not yet, as we treat it as a Kafir treats it. And this makes us all the same deserving of punishment. We know that Muhammad, blessing and peace be on him, is the prophet of Allah, and yet we are as unwilling as a Kafir to follow him. We know that God has cursed liars, has positively declared hell as the abode of all who give and take bribes, has denounced those who borrow and lend at interest as the worst of sinners, has condemned slander as being as bad as eating a brother's flesh, and has warned that obscene behavior, pornography, and debauchery will meet with a severe punishment. Yet, despite knowing all this, we freely indulge in all these views as if we had absolutely no fear of God's displeasure. This is why we are not rewarded. We are not rewarded. We are Muslims in appearance only. The fact that those who do not accept God's sovereignty rule over us and subject us to ignominy on every possible occasion shows that we are being punished for ignoring Islam, God's greatest gift to us. Dear brother, nothing I have said today is intended as a blame. I have not come to censure. My aim is to kindle the desire in you to recover pleasure that has been lost. Such a desire arises when a man realizes exactly what he has lost and how valuable it was. I have spoken sharp and pungent words only to awaken you and compel you to think. Desires for knowledge. To become a real Muslim, as I said, the foremost requisite is knowledge of Islam. Every Muslim ought to know the teaching of the Quran, which way was shown by the Prophet, blessing and peace be on him, and what Islam is, and what those things are which really differentiate with Islam from Kufr. Nobody can be a Muslim without this knowledge. The pity is that you show no desire to acquire this knowledge. This knowledge indicates that still you do not realize what a great gift you are being deprived of. My brother, a mother does not give milk to a child until he dries and demands it. When a man feels thirsty and he searches for water, God brings him to it. If you yourself are not conscious of your thirst, it will be useless if even a well brimming with water appears before you. You must first understand what a great loss you are suffering by remaining ignorant of Islam. Book of God is with you, but you do not know what is written in it. You do not even know the meaning of kalima La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. There is no God, but Allah. Muhammad is Allah's messenger. By reciting which you enter Islam, nor do you appreciate what responsibilities involved on you after reading this kalima. Can there be a greater loss than this from a Muslim? You know the damage caused if crops are burned. You know the suffering which result from failure to earn a livelihood. You know the harm resulting from loss of property, but you do not know the loss of being ignorant of Islam. When you understand the nature of this loss, you will yourself come and ask to be spared of it. And when you make this request, then inshallah means will be available to restore the greatest of gift to you. Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahil aliyyil azim, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahil aliyyil azim.